My rich girlfriend dumped me after meeting my parents at a casual dinner. She said, "I thought you came from a good family, but your dad's a mechanic and your mom cleans houses. I can't introduce you to my social circle." 6 months later, her father's company got acquired by the startup I'd been building. Now he reports directly to me, and she keeps texting, begging me to come back. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything figured out. I was 28, dating Isabella Romano for almost 2 years, and genuinely believed we had a future together. Isabella came from old money, the kind where her family's been wealthy for generations, with a trust fund that could buy a small country and social connections that opened doors I didn't even know existed. Me? I'm Marco Benedetti, son of Antonio Benedetti, who's been fixing cars in Brooklyn for 30 years, and Maria Benedetti, who's been cleaning houses in Manhattan's Upper East Side for just as long. But here's the thing, I never hid that from Isabella. From day one, I was upfront about my background. We met at a tech conference in Silicon Valley. I was there pitching my startup, CloudSync Solutions, to potential investors. Isabella was there with her Stanford MBA friends, networking and playing the part of the sophisticated heiress. When she approached me after my presentation, I was honestly starstruck. She was gorgeous, long dark hair, designer everything, and this confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. She seemed genuinely interested in my company, asked smart questions about our cloud infrastructure technology, and didn't bat an eye when I mentioned growing up in Brooklyn. We exchanged numbers, and by the end of that week, we were inseparable. For almost 2 years, everything was perfect. Isabella would visit my tiny apartment in Queens, and I'd spend weekends at her family's estate in the Hamptons. She never once complained about the subway rides or my second-hand furniture. When she met my parents briefly at a coffee shop 6 months into our relationship, she was polite and charming. My mom, Maria, immediately loved her, and even my usually skeptical dad, Antonio, admitted she seemed like good people. But there was always this underlying tension I couldn't quite place. Isabella's friends were polite to me, but I could sense the condescension. The way they'd ask what I did for work with that particular tone, like they expected me to say I was still figuring it out. When I'd explain CloudSync, how we were revolutionizing data management for mid-size companies, they'd nod and change the subject to their latest vacation in Monaco or their friend's wedding in Tuscany. Isabella's parents, Giuseppe and Francesca Romano, were a different story entirely. I'd met them a handful of times at family gatherings, and while they weren't openly hostile, Giuseppe had this way of looking at me like I was a temporary phase his daughter was going through. Francesca would smile politely and ask surface-level questions about my little computer business before pivoting to discuss Isabella's trust fund investments or their latest acquisition for Romano Holdings, their real estate empire. Despite all this, I was planning to propose. I had the ring picked out, nothing too flashy because I knew Isabella's style, but something meaningful. A vintage piece I found in Little Italy that reminded me of her grandmother's engagement ring she'd shown me in old family photos. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in November. Isabella had been hinting for months that she wanted to meet my parents properly, not just the brief coffee shop encounter. She wanted to see where I grew up, understand my roots better. I was thrilled. Finally, I thought, she wants to really be part of my world. I planned a casual dinner at my childhood home in Bensonhurst. Nothing fancy, just my mom's famous lasagna, some good wine, and quality time. I warned Isabella it would be different from what she was used to, but she insisted she was excited. My parents went all out. My mom, Maria, spent the entire day cooking. She made her signature lasagna from scratch, garlic bread, antipasto, the works. My dad, Antonio, took the afternoon off from the shop, which he never does, to help set up and make sure everything was perfect. They were so excited to finally spend real time with the woman their son was serious about. When Isabella arrived, she looked stunning as always, but I noticed she seemed tense. She kept checking her phone and looking around our modest 2-bedroom house like she was taking inventory. Still, dinner started well enough. My parents were warm and welcoming, asking about her work, her family, sharing stories about my childhood. My dad told his favorite story about teaching me to change oil when I was 12, how I got so covered in grease that my mom made me shower twice. My mom showed Isabella photo albums, including the embarrassing high school pictures every parent loves to share. Isabella laughed in all the right places, complimented the food, and seemed to be enjoying herself. But I could sense something was off. She kept deflecting when my parents asked about her family's business, giving vague answers about investments and real estate. When my mom mentioned how proud she was of her house cleaning clients, how some families had become like extended family to her, Isabella's smile became strained. The breaking point came when my dad mentioned a client whose luxury car he'd been working on. "You know, Marco," he said, wiping sauce from his beard, "Mrs. Peterson's Maserati had the same issue you helped me diagnose last month. That engineering degree of yours comes in handy even in the shop." He was beaming with pride, the way he always did when he talked about how my education complemented his hands-on experience. But I saw Isabella's face change. Something cold flickered in her eyes. The evening ended cordially enough. Isabella thanked my parents for dinner, complimented my mom's cooking, and we said our goodbyes. But during the drive back to Manhattan, she was unusually quiet. "Everything okay?" I asked as we sat in traffic on the BQE. "Fine," she replied, but her tone said otherwise. It wasn't until we got back to her apartment that she finally spoke her mind. We were in her pristine living room, the one with the Italian marble coffee table and the original Monet on the wall, when she turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. "Marco, we need to talk." Those 4 words. Every guy knows those 4 words mean your world is about to end. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," she continued, pacing to her floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook Central Park. "About our future, about whether we're really compatible long-term." "What do you mean?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew where this was heading. She turned back to me, and her expression was colder than I'd ever seen it. "Tonight really opened my eyes. I thought you came from a good family, Marco. I mean, I knew your parents weren't wealthy, but I assumed they were at least professional. Educated." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Isabella, what are you talking about? My parents are amazing people. They worked their asses off to give me opportunities they never had. Your father fixes cars, Marco. Your mother cleans houses." She said it like she was pointing out a fundamental character flaw. "I can't introduce you to my social circle knowing that. Do you understand what that would do to my reputation? My family's reputation?" I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. This was the woman I'd been planning to propose to. The woman who'd spent 2 years in my life, who'd met my parents before and never said a word. "Are you serious right now?" I managed to ask. "Dead serious. I come from a certain world, Marco. My friends, my family, our business associates, they have expectations. I can't show up to charity galas and board meetings with someone whose father has grease under his fingernails. My father is one of the most honest, hard-working men you'll ever meet. My mother has helped raise half the kids on the Upper East Side while their actual parents were too busy with their careers to notice. They're incredible people." "I'm sure they're lovely," Isabella said dismissively. "But lovely doesn't change the fact that they're working class. I need someone who can move in my world without me having to make excuses for their background." The worst part wasn't just what she was saying, it was how calm she was saying it. Like she was discussing the weather or what to order for lunch. There was no emotion, no recognition that she was destroying something that had mattered to both of us. "So that's it?" I asked. 2 years, and you're throwing it all away because my parents work for a living?" "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm being realistic about what works and what doesn't. We come from different worlds, Marco. I thought maybe we could bridge that gap, but tonight made it clear that we can't." I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. I was too hurt and too angry to continue the conversation without saying something I'd regret. "Marco, wait," she called after me. I turned back, hoping maybe she'd realized how awful she sounded, that she wanted to take it back. "I hope we can still be friends," she said instead. I left without another word. The next few weeks were brutal. Isabella didn't just break up with me, she completely erased me from her life. Mutual friends stopped inviting me to parties where she might be present. I heard through the grapevine that she was already dating someone new, Alessandro Conti, heir to a hotel fortune, someone whose pedigree met her exacting standards. But here's what Isabella didn't know about me. I'd been building cloud sync solutions for 3 years before I met her. What started as a side project while I was working as a software engineer had grown into something significant. We had 12 employees, contracts with 43 companies, and revenue that was climbing every quarter. More importantly, we'd been in acquisition talks with several major players in the tech industry. I'd kept the details quiet because I didn't want to get anyone's hopes up, including my own, until deals were actually signed. Isabella knew I had a startup, but she never understood the scope of what we were building. 3 weeks after our breakup, Tech Dynamic Corporation made an offer to acquire Cloud Sync for $87 million. Tech Dynamic wasn't just any tech company. They were a major player in enterprise software, with offices in 12 countries and annual revenue in the billions. More relevant to my personal situation, they'd been aggressively acquiring smaller companies to expand their cloud services division. The acquisition meant Cloud Sync would become Tech Dynamics' new cloud infrastructure department, and I'd be taking over as regional director of cloud services for the Northeast. It was the kind of position that came with serious money, serious responsibility, and serious respect in the industry. But the real kicker? One of Tech Dynamics' subsidiary holdings was Romano Holdings Real Estate. Giuseppe Romano, Isabella's father, had sold his company to Tech Dynamic 2 years earlier as part of their expansion into commercial real estate management. He'd stayed on as regional director of real estate operations, thinking he was set for life with his golden parachute deal. What he didn't anticipate was Tech Dynamics' restructuring plan. As part of the Cloud Sync acquisition, they were consolidating their regional operations. Giuseppe's real estate division was being folded into my cloud services department. Effective immediately, Giuseppe Romano, the man who'd looked at me like I was temporary help at his daughter's side, would be reporting directly to me. The irony was so perfect it felt like the universe was correcting some cosmic injustice. My first day as regional director was a Monday in March. I walked into Tech Dynamics Manhattan headquarters wearing a tailored suit, carrying a leather briefcase, and knowing that everything in my life had changed overnight. The executive conference room was packed for my introduction meeting. Department heads, regional managers, team leaders, including Giuseppe Romano, who was sitting at the far end of the table reviewing paperwork. When I walked in, Giuseppe looked up casually, then did a double-take that was visible from across the room. His face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like fear. "Good morning, everyone," I began, standing at the head of the table. I'm Marco Benedetti, your new Regional Director of Cloud Services. I'm excited to be working with all of you to integrate our operations and take Tech Dynamics Northeastern Division to the next level. Giuseppe's face had gone completely pale. He kept looking down at his paperwork, then back up at me, like he couldn't quite process what was happening. I went around the table, introducing myself to each department head, outlining my background and vision for our integrated operations. When I got to Giuseppe, I extended my hand with a professional smile. Mr. Romano, I look forward to working together. I believe we met briefly a few times. I used to date your daughter Isabella. His handshake was weak, and he could barely make eye contact. Yes, of course. Marco. This is unexpected. Life has a funny way of working out, doesn't it? The meeting continued with me outlining the new reporting structure, project timelines, and performance expectations. Giuseppe sat there like he was watching his own execution. Every time I mentioned accountability, results, or leadership expectations, I could see him shrinking further into his chair. After the meeting, Giuseppe lingered behind as everyone else filed out. Marco, he started, his voice uncertain. I had no idea you were. I mean, Isabella never mentioned that your company was. Was what, Mr. Romano? Successful? Profitable? Worth nearly 9 figures? He winced. I think there may have been some misunderstandings. No misunderstandings, I replied, gathering my papers. Your daughter made her position very clear. She couldn't introduce me to your social circle because my father fixes cars and my mother cleans houses. She needed someone who could move in your world without her having to make excuses. Giuseppe looked like he wanted to crawl under the conference table. Marco, you have to understand, Isabella is young, sometimes she says things without thinking. She seemed pretty clear in her thinking to me. But don't worry, Mr. Romano. This is business, not personal. I expect the same level of professionalism from you that I expect from all my department heads. Your family relationships won't affect your performance reviews, as long as you meet your targets. He nodded quickly, probably relieved that I wasn't planning to fire him on the spot. Oh, and Mr. Romano? My father still fixes cars, and my mother still cleans houses. The difference is, now my father owns 3 shops in Brooklyn and Queens, and my mother runs her own cleaning service with 12 employees. Turns out, when your son becomes a tech executive, you can afford to expand the family businesses. Giuseppe's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I'll see you at the department meeting Thursday morning, I concluded, and walked out of the conference room. Word traveled fast in wealthy social circles. Within a week, everyone who mattered in Manhattan knew that Marco Benedetti, the guy Isabella Romano had dumped for being beneath her standards, was now her father's boss and one of the youngest regional directors in Tech Dynamics history. The first text from Isabella came 2 days after my promotion went public in the business journals. Marco, I heard about your new position. Congratulations. I always knew you were going to be successful. Hope you're doing well. I deleted it without responding. The second text came 3 days later. I keep thinking about us and wondering if I made a mistake. I miss what we had. Delete. The third text, a week after that. My father mentioned you're working together now. He says you're doing an amazing job. I'm so proud of you. Delete. The texts kept coming. At first, they were casual, congratulations, small talk, mentions of mutual friends. Then they became more personal. Isabella started reminiscing about our relationship, apologizing for how things ended, hinting that she'd been hasty in her decision. I've been thinking about that dinner at your parents' house. Your mom's lasagna was incredible. I should have told her that night. I saw photos from Lisa's wedding. Remember when we talked about what our wedding would be like? I miss you, Marco. I miss us. I didn't respond to any of them. But I have to admit, there was a certain satisfaction in watching her desperation grow as the weeks passed. Meanwhile, at work, Giuseppe was walking on eggshells around me. He was overly formal, excessively polite, and clearly terrified that I was going to take revenge on him for his daughter's behavior. The truth was, he was actually a competent manager when he wasn't being condescending, and I had no intention of sabotaging the department for personal reasons. But I didn't go out of my way to make him comfortable, either. During our weekly one-on-one meetings, Giuseppe would try to make small talk, asking about my family or mentioning Isabella in what he probably thought were subtle ways. I kept every conversation strictly professional. How are the Q2 projections looking, Mr. Romano? Good, very good. The Manhattan portfolio is exceeding expectations by 12%. Marco, I hope you know that Isabella has been asking about you. That's excellent news about Manhattan. What about the Brooklyn developments? He got the message eventually. 2 months into my new position, Isabella's texts escalated. Marco, please just call me back. I know I hurt you, but I want to make things right. I was wrong about everything. Your parents are wonderful people, and I was an idiot to say otherwise. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Please give us another chance. My friends keep asking why we're not together anymore. I don't know what to tell them because I don't have a good answer. The last one almost made me laugh. Her friends, the same ones who'd barely tolerated me when I was dating her, were now probably wondering why she'd let go of a tech executive with an 8-figure net worth. 3 months in, Isabella showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a budget review when my assistant buzzed me. Mr. Benedetti, there's an Isabella Romano here to see you. She says it's personal. I should have told my assistant to send her away. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. Send her in. Isabella walked into my office looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine, as always. Designer dress, perfectly styled hair, expensive handbag. But there was something different about her demeanor, less confident, more uncertain. Marco, she said, hovering near the door like she wasn't sure she was welcome. Isabella. This is unexpected. I gestured to one of the chairs across from my desk. Please, sit. She perched on the edge of the chair, clutching her handbag. I know you've been getting my texts. I have. And you haven't responded to any of them. I haven't. She took a shaky breath. I came here to apologize. Really apologize, not just through a text message. What I said that night, about your parents, about your background, it was awful. Inexcusable. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. It was honest, though. You said what you really thought. No, it wasn't what I really thought. It was what I thought I was supposed to think. My whole life, I've been surrounded by people who judge others based on money and status and connections. I got caught up in that mindset, and I hurt the best man I've ever known. The best man you've ever known, who you couldn't introduce to your social circle. She winced. I know how that sounded. I know how horrible it was. But Marco, I've learned so much about myself these past few months. About what really matters. Have you? Or have you learned that I'm worth $87 million now? The question hung in the air between us. Isabella's face flushed, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked genuinely flustered. That's not what this is about. Isn't it? 6 months ago, you couldn't introduce me to your friends because my father has grease under his fingernails. Now I'm a regional director at a Fortune 500 company, and suddenly you've had an epiphany about what really matters? You're being unfair, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Let me ask you something, Isabella. If I were still living in Queens, still running a small startup, still just the son of a mechanic and a house cleaner, would you be here right now? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew the truth. I thought so, I said quietly. Marco, please. I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. But people can change. I can change. Maybe you can. But some things, once they're broken, can't be fixed. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. I love you, she whispered. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I love you. For just a second, looking at her sitting there vulnerable and apologetic, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost remembered why I'd fallen for her in the first place. Then I thought about my parents. About my father's pride when he talked about teaching me to change oil. About my mother's joy when she showed Isabella those photo albums. About how excited they'd been to welcome her into our family, only to find out she thought they were beneath her standards. I know you think you do, I said finally. But you don't love me, Isabella. You love the idea of me now that I'm successful enough to meet your standards. You love the status, the money, the fact that your friends would be impressed instead of judgmental. That's not true. If it's not true, then why didn't you fight for us 6 months ago? Why didn't you tell your social circle to go to hell if they had a problem with my parents? Why didn't you stand by me when it would have actually mattered? She didn't have an answer for that. I think you should go, I said, not unkindly. And Isabella? Please stop texting me. We both need to move on. She stood up slowly, her composure finally cracking. What about us? What about everything we had together? What we had was real, at least for me. But it wasn't strong enough to survive the truth about who you really are. And that's not something that changes just because my bank account did. After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. I felt sad, but also strangely relieved. Closure, I guess. The text stopped after that day. Isabella finally got the message that there was no going back. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that she was engaged to Alessandro Conti, the hotel heir she'd started dating after our breakup. They had a lavish wedding in the Hamptons that got featured in 3 different society magazines. Looking at the photos, Isabella looked beautiful and happy, surrounded by exactly the kind of people she'd always wanted to impress. I hope she was genuinely happy. Despite everything, I didn't wish her ill. As for me, I kept building Cloud Sync's integration with Tech Dynamic, kept working with Giuseppe, who gradually became less terrified of me and more respectful, and kept taking care of my parents. My dad's 3 auto shops were thriving, and my mom's cleaning service had expanded to include office buildings and commercial properties. Every Sunday, I still went to family dinner in Bensonhurst. Same house, same table, same stories about my dad's customers and my mom's clients. The only difference was that now my parents didn't worry about my future anymore. They knew their son was going to be just fine. And you know what? They were right. I was going to be just fine. Better than fine, actually. Because I'd learned something important from the whole experience with Isabella: the people who love you for who you are when you have nothing are the ones worth keeping. Everyone else is just along for the ride. My father still has grease under his fingernails. My mother still takes pride in making other people's homes beautiful. And I'm still proud to be their son, whether I'm worth 8 figures or $8. Some things money can't buy, and some standards money can't change. Isabella learned that lesson too late. But at least she learned it. Edit: a lot of people are asking what happened to Giuseppe at work. He's actually doing well. Once he got over his initial panic, he turned out to be a solid colleague. We have a good professional relationship now, and he's never brought up Isabella again. I think he learned his lesson about judging people by their backgrounds. Edit 2: for those asking if I ever regret not giving Isabella another chance, honestly, no. What she said that night wasn't something she blurted out in anger. It was a carefully considered position based on how she really saw the world. Success didn't make me a different person, it just revealed who she truly was. Edit 3: my parents don't know the full details of what Isabella said that night. They just know we broke up because we weren't compatible. I see no reason to hurt them with the specifics. They're too good-hearted to understand the kind of cruelty anyway.